Good morning. For those who don't know me, which is probably a good number of you, my name is Tom van Waveren. I've actually realized the other day that I've been working in animation for 20 years now, and I've loved every day of it. And I also like the collaborative nature of it. I think that's really, it's putting great teams together and making great content together. And I probably love that concept of co-production because I'm a little bit of a co-production myself. So I'm a French-Dutch co-production. My mother being French, my father being Dutch. And apart from that sounding nice, from the very outset in my life, I've always been confronted to two cultures. My two different families just looked at the world and life in a slightly different way, which I always thought was actually quite fascinating, which I think is a lot of what makes international animation projects and even just national projects, because it's such a collaborative industry and process. I think that makes it really wonderful. So I run a company that's called Cake, and it's based out of London, and we are known as a distributor mainly, but we also develop, package, produce, and exploit the series. And as exploit sounds rather, anyway. We try to optimize its commercial success with our partners, is probably a better way of putting it. And we're very much focused on the world. Apart from having started a joint venture animation studio last year in Dublin called Gingerbread, we work with animation studios and producers and companies from really around the world, and so this is really one of my lists. We work with companies from Australia, New Zealand, South Korea, Singapore, China, South Africa, Chile, Brazil, Mexico, Canada, USA, France, Ireland, Germany, Spain, and of course the UK. And those are all shows that we are either developing, producing, or actively distributing. And what we love is that interaction. And particularly at the moment where it seems to be that animation is booming, in that talking to studios around Europe and around Australia, North America, everybody seems to be full and being offered more work. And at the same time, we're in an environment where we're all still pretending that we live in a world where linear TV is who we all produce for. And we've been saying this for 15 years. We've actually been saying for 15 years, it's about to change. It's about to change. And I think it has changed in the last 10 years, and even more so in the last 5. And the wonderful thing is that those players that helped us start 20 years ago are still there. And they're finding their way into this brave new world, as are we. And there's a lot of new platforms that are trying to supply the content to our consumers when they want it. And where they want it, and so that creates a lot of opportunity. But it's also a pretty turbulent environment, and I think that a very natural thing to do in a turbulent time is to huddle up with others. If you know that the reality is going to be the same for the next 20 years, you can just set up your business plan, do your own thing, and see if it works. If you don't actually know what next year is what 5 years from now are going to look like, you probably want to talk to some of your friends. And if you don't really know what 2 years from now are going to look like, you want to talk to them every week. And I think that's what really is motivated me personally to engage with people in the industry. And that starts with, although my company is based in London, I'm personally based in the Netherlands, and I've always kept in contact, just out of interest, with the production companies there. And 2.5 years ago, they asked me if I would become the chair of the Producers Association, Animation Producers Association there. And the main goal that we had was really to copy what you did so successfully here, what Animation UK did so successfully here, is to open up the tax credit that was really set up for feature films, and just lobby with the organizations that and the politicians that made that possible, and explain to them that animation series production is as obvious a recipient, or basically a candidate to be recipient of that kind of support, and that was done successfully here. So I thought, well, let's try to do. We had a similar situation in the Netherlands where there was a new system for feature films, and we tried to. So our goal was to get that turned around, and we found that. So we started that process, and then 1 year into that, I got a call from Philippe Alessandri, who had just become the chairman of the SPFA, which is the French Animation Producers Association. And although I've never actually co-produced with him, it's somebody I've been having beers and coffees with for the last 20 years. And we know each other well. We know each other's businesses and each other's backgrounds. And he called me and said, Tom, here's this thing. I've had this idea for a while, and I thought you might be interested in this. It's like, I think we should actually create a European Animation Producers Association, or really an animation association. We should unite the industry, because there's a lot of things that we should be sharing perspectives on. We should share information, we should share best practices, we should actually be able to speak as one voice when we speak, and not only to our national parliaments, but also in international context. So he said, so my idea is to create a European Animation Association. And I was like, okay, that's great, but you've just stolen my fire, because I just discussed that with the board of the Animation Producers Netherlands like 3 weeks ago. But I love the idea, so let's do it. So then we compared notes, and I think I knew probably 4 or 5 people in 4 or 5 associations, and so did he, some of overlap, and we started just putting a list together, and that led to, not last NC, but the NC before, we actually got people into a room, and that led to everybody confirming that they also thought it was a good idea. And so in October 16, we just officially founded Animation in Europe, and that's the name. We couldn't call it Animation Europe because there's already a website that has that name, and we didn't want to get sued in the first week of our existence. So it's Animation in Europe. And really, that coincided just by, I think that serendipity is probably the right word, with a moment where Creative Europe, that manages the media program for the European Commission, they actually came to Annecy, the same Annecy that we had our first meeting with Animation in Europe, and they were looking for somebody to speak to about the future of the media program, and particularly the role of animation within that program. And what's very interesting to know is that animation is a success story within Europe, but also therefore within the media program. And they can clearly, apart from that, there was a clear realization within Creative Europe that animation is particularly well suited for a digital world. First of all, it is more and more a digital product. It lends itself to all the different tablets, phones, and other usages. And it actually travels really well in a world that is more and more global. And so for them, it was obvious, and that was actually a very interesting first meeting when they said, we've actually come to the conclusion that there should be an action plan to lift the European animation industry from what it is today to become multiples in its success, because it has that potential. We can see that from our data. So it's like, would you work with us to make that happen? So, yeah, we can do that. So what was really fun is that then we start discussing how do we do that. So concretely, because Creative Europe has a great database, they know who applies for all their different funds. They actually invited, I don't know exactly, they probably invited over 100 people to come to Brussels, and we did that twice. But that was a mix of people, so there were producers, distributors, funds, film funds, TV funds, schools, lobbyists, broadcasters, other associations linked to our industry. And we basically did, which was fun, we just did 2 sessions with basically a group of this size where we effectively did a SWOT analysis of European animation. So we sat down at different tables, and one table would do strengths, the other one weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And we would circulate 4 times, so you would sit at every table once and share the result of that at the end of the day. And we came back 2 months later and did it again with slightly different groups, because not everybody came the second time, and some others came in. But then the first time it was really very much at a macro level, and the second time it was more what are your day-to-day challenges. And what we did then, we just took all that data and just started to digest that and to edit that into a text, which we then looked at and discussed, and we basically created a document that came out of that, and that's what was presented at Cartoon Forum on when was it? It was on the 12th of September this year, which was called European Animation Plan. I personally feel that's a little bit grand. I think it should actually have been called European Animation Agenda, because what it really does is it doesn't actually give that many solutions yet, but it really tries to identify what the challenges are that we share as an industry across Europe. So there's three main focus areas. The first one is, I would call marketing, although it was the name that it was given is fostering the global reach of animation, but it's really marketing. Second one is training, and the third one is finance. And so I think we probably have all experienced the might of the people who are, for many of us, our biggest clients, but also our biggest competitors, which are the specialty channels and the US majors. The resources that they have compared to the resources that independent producers in Europe have just mean that they completely can blow us out of the market, and they try to do so every day. So how do we actually, how do we stand up to that? Well, we can't match them in funds, because just to give you a comparison, if you look at the Angry Birds feature had a bigger P&A budget than what the European Media Program has available yearly to support film in Europe. So that's, it's just so, but I mean, the wonderful thing is we live in a digital age, and it's much easier in a digital world to be smart if you haven't actually got the financial means to be big. And even those big guys are actually very good when it comes to giving themselves a profile on all the social networks that we and our audience are present on. So that's one of the things. Let's think about how we are smarter as an industry. But specifically to the feature film genre is what is the strength of a Sony Pictures or a Pixar or something? Is that they actually announce the features that they want to be releasing 4 years from now. Now, there's not very many studios in Europe that feel sufficiently confident about their own ability to get a pipeline funded or produced to actually announce it 4 years ahead. But it actually means that you can communicate with your fans 4 years ahead. And it means that by the time your feature comes out, everybody knows about it already because you've been talking about it for 4 years. So one of the plans is maybe what we should do is find a way to, and of course there's 26 animated feature films being produced yearly in Europe. So there's no point trying to announce 26 features a year, every year and 4 years ahead, because that will completely defy the purpose. But I think that as an industry, we can probably analyze which are the 3 to 5 features that have most legs in that international competition for audience. And why don't we look at a way of creating a slate that would be best of Europe, or probably have a better title, but that would be the intention. And saying, okay, well, we can announce that slate so many years in advance. We can certainly work together also on taking this. If you ask Illumination McGuff, they produce for a feature film, apart from the feature film itself, they produce between 30 and 40 minutes of animation that is specifically aimed at supporting the promotional efforts of partners, i.e. the McDonald's ads that you see on TV with the characters. They do all that animation, and they actually have budget to do that. So one of the things we said to European to the media programs, like, you need to find funds to actually not just help a feature film being made, but we need to be able to, on independent feature films, produce, well, maybe it's not 40 minutes, but if we could do 20 minutes extra that are actually aimed purely at the promotional efforts, we'd be in a much, much better place. And apart from that is really coordinating launches of releases of independent movies. And that's just starting that process earlier, making sure that nobody starts thinking about distribution when they deliver their master copies. And I'm sure that's fewer people than before, but it's still, a lot of people are still locked into their production reality rather than thinking, how do I, if I'm creating an IP, if that's my ambition, that process of communicating with my audience starts the day I decide that I want to get it financed. So getting into that rationale. And a very practical one is Disney has always been very successful in distributing its shows, not only because they're good shows, but also because they finance the dubs. So if you take it to a market, you don't have to negotiate who's going to pay for the dubs, who controls the rights. If I then do another deal, can I get it back to you from you for 50%, which we spend as a distributor a lot of time having these silly discussions, because by the time you want to access the dub, the market has changed. And anyway, it's a headache. We think it would be good to look from a European perspective, how do we get systematic support to create a standard set of dubs so you know you can go to the key markets from day one. So let's check if I'm not over. I can talk about this all day, so I have to be careful. And then the second big chapter, so you see that basically, so marketing, let's be smarter, let's work together, and let's share best practices. When feature films, it was great to see My Vie de Courgette do so well, that had a very unusual strategy of really living in the festival circuit for much longer than you would normally do, just to create an organic buzz around the feature film, which worked really, really well, apart from being a very special story. But it's just, let's look at what we all do and learn from each other. And so the second one is really talent. So talent retention, and we talk about talent. What I found interesting to hear is that everybody agreed that apart from, of course, we want to have great creators like we have in Europe and retain them, but also like line producers, a good line producer worth their weight in gold, and not enough of them around. The best ones, like a lot of the top talent, leave for California. So how do we actually make sure that they stay here? How do we train more of them? It's really, we think that one of the things is, how do we make sure that when we employ the key talent in our companies, how do we employ them not for a project, but for a slate of projects? How can we give them a perspective that if they work for a company, they're actually increasing their career chances rather than limiting them? We don't necessarily have the answer, but it could be helping companies really to make it easier to finance a slate rather than just finance a project. But it can also be putting groupings together of studios that have been working together for years and actually say, you know what, let's do a slate together, and by doing so, retain talent that is otherwise going to go elsewhere. But it's also making sure that, and this is again on a national level, but let's make sure that we talk as industry, we find a platform to talk to schools that actually train people for notionally our industry. But I think it's true in every country that the notion is that at least a third of the people that are notionally being trained to be part of our industry are being trained to go on the dole or wash dishes in a restaurant, because they're certainly not being trained to do anything that resembles a skill set that we need in our companies. So how do we increase that? How do we improve that dialogue, particularly because we're all, and when we see I think the studios in Europe at the moment are all in search of good talent, and there's opportunity, but there's not enough of a connection between what is needed and the people are being, and people that are being trained. So, and apart from that, is if we do that effectively, it's also making sure that we apply lifelong learning, and everybody that's already in the studio is given the opportunity to keep their skills up to date, so they can stay employable throughout their career. So, and the last one is finance, which, although that's in a creative industry, that sounds kind of boring, but I think it's the reality of all of our daily lives. And it's really that in Europe, there is, apart from the fact that license fees have kept sliding from broadcasters in the perception that there's other monies that can compensate for that, we actually need those monies. We need to find a way to that stop sliding and to still stay there and not disappear. We need to make it possible for minority countries that can just bring less money to the table to still be the lead producer, and also in the context specifically of media, be able to apply for things like what's called Euromage, even if they're the smallest in dollars, even if they're initiated. But that's so make room for smaller players to be in the lead. Find systems and land networks for cash flowing projects and bringing in minimum guarantees and guarantee cash flow minimum guarantees, because here there's some infrastructure, but in most European countries it's very hard to find a bank that will have the conversation with you. And overall make the media program about rewarding success rather than rewarding the successful collection of empty letters. And so just having had the 5-minute sign 3 minutes ago, I'm now at 2. I'll skip the fact. Really, I mean, so that's really what we think are the areas where we need to focus and find concrete solutions and exchange ideas. So that's the next step. We're actually meeting the European Parliament at the end of January. But so what I'm happy to announce here is that Animation UK, who could not join as a founding member of Animation Europe because it was still forming itself, has now joined as from yesterday. So you are part of this plan, and you are part of Europe. And the other thing I wanted to say, that Europe is a continent. It's a geographical area. There are some countries within that choose to work closer together on legal and economic matters. But whether you're part of that or not, you remain part of Europe. And the tradition and culture and talent of the UK industry is very much needed and welcomed by the rest of the European animation industry. So we're very, very happy to have you all join. And should you not have joined, sit here in the room and think Animation UK has joined, but I haven't had the time to join Animation UK yet. You can do it today. You're very welcome, actually. The more of you we have on board, the stronger our voice will be, not only in the UK, but also in Europe. So now that we're all working together, let's go out and let's work with the world, because the world wants to work with us. We can work with the US, with the majors that are there, with specialty channels, OTT platforms, but also, as we'll hear later today, with China. And then if you don't want to be working with these big groups, go on YouTube, find your audience there, and make a fortune. But whatever you do, keep enjoying working in animation, enjoy the cultural exchange and the collaborative nature of this business, because I think we're very fortunate to have that as a reason to get up for in the morning. Thank you.